Franchising is about long-term wins. It's about growing your brand, building up unit level economics, and building up revenue streams, recurring revenue streams that builds up your cash flow and makes you a valuable company. How do you make money as a franchisor? What revenues will you be receiving? And ultimately, how do you reach profitability? So, what are these revenue streams and how do you make money? Well, your primary revenue streams as a franchisor are your initial franchise fees, your ongoing royalties, and revenue you're going to receive from your supply chain in the form of rebates. There's some other economic advantages that we're going to discuss at the end of this video. So let's dive into the revenue streams themselves. The first is the initial franchise fee. That's the fee that you're going to be paid by a franchisee when he or she signs a franchise agreement. Typical franchise fees, you'll see them range anywhere from $25,000 to $45,000. Sounds like a lot, but it's not. We're going to discuss why. So you receive that initial franchise fee. What is it? It's compensation to you that allows the franchisee to join your system. It's compensation for the license you grant your franchisee. They become a franchisee. They're going to have a franchise agreement. They'll have probably a 10-year term or maybe a 5-year term. So that initial franchise fee is compensation for joining the system. The franchise fee is also compensation to you to cover your training costs and expenses. You onboard a new franchisee, you're going to provide them with training, you're going to provide them with pre-opening support. So you have expenses when you onboard these franchisees. Now, we're going to talk about royalties and rebates, and those are important revenue streams. But sticking with the initial franchise fee, is that a big profit center for a franchisor? I will tell you more often than not, it's not a profit center. It's really recouping expenses. So, for example, you're selling franchises right now. You're going to have franchise sales expenses if you're engaged in digital marketing to recruit franchisees. If you're working with franchise brokers, typically franchise brokers, their compensation is contingent, but it's typically 50 or more % of your initial franchise fee. So if a broker brings you a qualified candidate, the franchisee signs on, you receive that initial franchise fee. Most of that is going to go out to pay the broker their commission, and that's okay. So when you consider franchise fees as a franchisor, I wouldn't look at them as profit centers. I'd look at that as sort of a recoupment of expenses, of your franchisee recruiting expenses, of fees that you may be paying to brokers for recruiting franchisees, and to cover or absorb your initial training and pre-opening support obligations for franchisees. So the initial franchise fee, it's important cash flow. It's not a big profit center. Now, typical franchise fees you'd see range, I'd say, from $25,000 to $45,000. And again, a big reason why franchise fees are high is because franchise brokers have become very important in the franchise sales process, and they're compensated based on a percentage of your initial franchise fees. So out of the 3 primary revenue streams, the first was your initial franchise fee. It's not really a profit center. It's for expense recruitment. Now, the second profit center, or the second revenue center, is your ongoing royalties. And as a franchisor, royalties are the most important asset that you could be building as an organization. It's critical. And royalties do become your profit center. So what are royalties? So the typical franchise agreement will say and require that on an ongoing basis, either monthly or weekly, your franchisee is going to pay to you an ongoing royalty fee. Now, the royalty fees most commonly are a percentage of the franchisee's gross sales, not their profits, their gross sales. Some franchisors, rather than charging a percentage-based royalty, they'll charge a fixed fee royalty, right? Depends on the industry. Or you may have a hybrid of both, right? It's going to be the greater of a percentage or a fixed fee amount. But the important point here is your royalties represent ongoing compensation paid to you as franchisor. It's paid to you as compensation for your continuing support, but it's also a profit center, right? And now think about why you're franchising. You're franchising to expand the reach of your brand, right? Open up additional locations, but it's also build wealth and economies of scale. So When you sell a franchise, many times in industry, we talk about deal value. What's the value of every new franchisee that you sign up? Well, when I sign up a franchisee, I'm going to receive the initial franchise fee. There's value there, but based on what we discussed earlier, let's set that aside. Let's assume that just helps us recoup expenses in the sales process. So we sign on a franchisee. If the franchisee succeeds, as they succeed, let's assume there's a 10-year term, what's going to be the revenue they earn each year, and what's going to be the royalties they're paying to us? That becomes the deal value, right? The value of a franchisee is not that initial franchise fee, but the ongoing royalties you'll be receiving. You're going to build up your organization, right? Years 1 and 2, you're going to start slow, support franchisees, build them up. Years 3 to 5, you're going to accelerate, keep adding those franchisees. Well, what's the future value of your company? If you ever go to sell your company or value your company, in large measure, it's going to be valued based on the EBITDA valuation, right? The cash flow that you receive on a weekly or monthly consistent basis from your franchisees. So your royalties, that is your profit center. That's the holy grail of franchising in terms of building a successful organization from a financial perspective. So your first revenue stream was your initial franchise fees. Your second is your royalties. Third are what we'll call rebates. Keep in mind, franchising always needs to be a win-win. And your supply chain should be super efficient, provide your franchisees with value, right? Advantages, whether it's better products, better delivery, and even more cost-effective products. As you grow your franchise organization, you're going to grow your buying power. Now, some of those economic advantages should go to your franchisees, but also you're going to have vendors that are going to be willing to pay you rebates on what your franchisees purchase from the vendors. So you build up a great organization, you have suppliers of certain products, you'll enter into an agreement with those suppliers, and they'll pay to you, the franchise company, a percentage of the franchisee purchases. So are rebates legal? Sure, they're absolutely legal in the franchise world. They need to be disclosed properly in your FDD. For example, in your FDD every year, franchisor needs to disclose the amount of revenue they receive from rebates and what percentage those rebates form of their overall revenue. So you have to disclose it, but it's a very legitimate source of income. Now, keep in mind too, there's recoupment of expenses there too, because as a franchisor, you should be monitoring supply chain, evaluating suppliers, and making the system better. I'm a big advocate. It should benefit both, right? You don't want a rebate that is just driven by higher prices to your franchisees. You want balance. You want your franchisees to have good unit level economics, lower supply costs, and at the same time build up a revenue stream for your franchise organization in the form of rebate. So how do you make money as a franchisor? Well, you're going to ultimately, you need to sell franchises. You need to onboard qualified franchisees that are going to succeed for themselves, perform well, and build up the value, deal value of your royalties and ultimately your rebates. So your initial franchise fee, that's really to recoup expenses. I wouldn't look at it as a profit center. It will be revenues, but that money's going to flow out in the franchise sales process. Royalties, that's why you're franchising. You want to build a sustainable, durable organization that every year you add franchisees, your franchisees succeed, you improve their lives, but you're also building up that recurring revenue, that recurring cash flow of royalties, which ultimately is going to form the valuation of your company years from now. Back to cash flow, rebates also from suppliers. Now, some of those rebates you may want to put into your brand development fund. Some of those rebates are revenue to your franchise system, and you shouldn't have those rebates come at the cost of franchisees in the sense that you don't want them paying above market, right? You do want to give them an advantage. Not a revenue stream, but another advantage of franchising that you have to think about, it depends on your industry, is sometimes we'll have clients contact us and say, Charles, not only do I want a franchise because to build out those revenue sources, but I'm in a great industry. I'm an innovator in this industry. I have employees that want their own businesses. And rather than them going to compete with me or new competitors coming into this space, I want to build my franchise organization as a defensive position. So it doesn't necessarily generate revenue, but it helps protect your business. So sort of sneaking that in, it's not a revenue source, but it goes hand in hand because you're protecting your business, you're protecting your revenue streams. And again, everything's about long-term valuation. Remember, if you're new to franchising years 1 and 2, you're pulling uphill. You want to organically attract franchisees. You want to be smart with your franchise recruitment. You want your first 10 franchisees to be super successful. They'll validate, they'll provide good economic numbers for your item 19. And then years 3 to 5, that's where you accelerate the growth. When you sell a franchise, don't focus on that initial franchise fee. Focus on the deal value. What is the long-term value and revenue, cash flow that successful franchisees will provide to you as a franchisor, and project out 5 years from now? What does cash flow look like? How many franchisees do you have to achieve that cash flow? What are the average gross sales they should be achieving for it? So how do you make money? Your royalties and your rebates and building a successful organization.